All right. Morning, afternoon, evening, good day to you all, etc. Right. So, sorry, I'm just distracted by the little chit chat. Okay, I'm going to start because I love this. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, so this is from the Four Loves. This is the second part, but they can be treated as standalone also. This is from the Four Loves by C.S. Lewis. If you haven't heard of him, where have you been? And this is Eros, erotic or romantic love. Expect a change in the colour of my cheeks at some stage. Okay, I can do it. I'm a grown-up. I'm tough. All right then, so let me channel my Lewis. Thank you, Jesus. Okay. By Eros, I mean, of course, that state which we call being in love, or if you prefer, that kind of love which lovers are in. Some readers may have been surprised when, in an earlier chapter, I described affection as the love in which our experience seems to come closest to that of the animals. Surely, it might be asked, our sexual functions bring us equally close. This is quite true as regards human sexuality in general. But I am not going to be concerned with human sexuality simply as such. Sexuality makes part of our subject only when it becomes an ingredient in the complex state of being in love. And that Eros includes other things besides sexual activity, I take for granted. If you prefer to put it that way, I am inquiring not into the sexuality which is common to us and the beasts, or even common to all men, but into one uniquely human variation of it which develops within love. What I call Eros. The carnal or animally sexual element within Eros, I intend, following an old usage, to call Venus. And I mean by Venus what is sexual, not in some cryptic or rarefied sense, such as a depth psychologist might explore, but in a perfectly obvious sense. What is known to be sexual by those who experience it. What could be proved to be sexual by the simplest observations. Sexuality may operate without Eros or as part of Eros. Let me hasten to add that I make the distinction simply in order to limit our inquiry and without any moral implications. I am not at all subscribing to the popular idea that it is the absence or presence of Eros which makes the sexual act impure or pure, degraded or fine, unlawful or lawful. If all who lay together without being in the state of Eros were abominable, why, we all come of tainted stock. The times and places in which marriage depends on Eros are in a small minority. Most of our ancestors were married off in early youth to partners chosen by their parents on grounds that had nothing to do with Eros. They went to the act with no other fuel, so to speak, than plain animal desire. And they did right. Honest Christian husbands and wives obeying their fathers and mothers, discharging to one another their marriage debt, and bringing up families in the fear of the Lord. Conversely, this act, done under the influence of a soaring and iridescent Eros, which reduces the role of the senses to a minor consideration, may yet be plain adultery, may involve breaking one's heart, deceiving a husband, betraying a friend, polluting hospitality, and deserting your children. It has not pleased God that the distinction between a sin and a duty should turn on fine feelings. This act, like any other, is justified, or not, by far more prosaic and definable criteria. By the keeping or breaking of promises, by justice or injustice, by charity or selfishness, by obedience or disobedience. My treatment rules out mere sexuality, sexuality without love, on grounds that have nothing to do with morals, because it is irrelevant to our purpose. To the evolutionist, Eros, the human variation, will be something that grows out of Venus, a late complication and development of the immemorial biological impulse. I'm going to just stop and clarify that sentence. He's saying those who ascribe to evolution as a workable hypothesis would assume that love grows from the animal desire. And it's like unnecessary, and it's just a complication. We must not assume, however, that this is necessarily what happens within the consciousness of the individual. There may be those who have first felt mere sexual appetite for a woman and then gone on at a later stage to fall in love with her. But I doubt if this is all that common. Very often what comes first is simply a delighted preoccupation with the beloved, a general, unspecified preoccupation with her in her totality. A man in this state really hasn't leisure to think of sex. He is far too busy thinking of a person. The fact that she is a woman is far less important than the fact that she is herself. He is full of desire, but the desire may not be sexually toned. If you asked him what he wanted, the true reply would often be to go on thinking of her. He is love's contemplative, and when, at a later stage, the explicitly sexual element awakes, he will not feel, unless scientific theories are influencing him, that this had all along been the root of the whole matter. He is more likely to feel that the incoming tide of Eros, having demolished many sandcastles and made islands of many rocks, has now at last, triumphant seventh wave, flooded this part of his nature also, the little pool of ordinary sexuality which was there on his beach before the tide came in. I love this man so much. Eros enters him like an invader, taking over and reorganizing one by one the institutions of a conquered country. It may have taken over many others before it reaches the sex in him, and it will reorganize that too. No one has indicated the nature of that reorganization more briefly and accurately than George Orwell, who disliked it and preferred sexuality in its native condition, uncontaminated by Eros. In 1984, the book, his dreadful hero, how much less human than the four-footed heroes of his excellent Animal Farm, before tousing the heroine, before tousing the heroine, demands a reassurance. You like doing this? He asks. I don't mean simply me. I mean the thing in itself. He is not satisfied till he gets the answer, I adore it. This little dialogue defines the reorganization. Sexual desire without Eros wants it, the thing in itself. Eros wants the beloved. The thing is a sensory pleasure. That is an event occurring within one's own body. We use a most unfortunate idiom when we say of a lustful man prowling the streets that he wants a woman. Strictly speaking, a woman is just what he does not want. He wants a pleasure for which a woman happens to be the necessary piece of apparatus. How much he cares about the woman, as such, may be gauged by his attitude to her 5 minutes after fruition. One does not keep the carton after one has smoked the cigarettes. Now, Eros makes a man really want not a woman, but one particular woman. In some mysterious but quite indisputable fashion, the lover desires the beloved herself, not the pleasure she can give. No lover in the world ever sought the embraces of the woman he loved as the result of a calculation, however unconscious, that they would be more pleasurable than those of any other woman. If he raised the question, he would no doubt expect this would be so, but to raise it would be to step outside the world of Eros altogether. The only man I know of who ever did raise it was Lucretius, and he was certainly not in love when he did so. It is interesting to note his answer. That austere voluptuary gave it as his opinion that love actually impairs sexual desire. The emotion was a distraction. It spoiled the cool and critical receptivity of his palate. A great poet, but Lord, what beastly fellows these Romans were. The reader will notice that Eros thus wonderfully transforms what is par excellence a need pleasure into the most appreciative of all pleasures. It is the nature of a need pleasure to show us the object solely in relation to our need, even our momentary need. But in Eros, a need at its most intense sees the object most intensely as a thing admirable in herself, important far beyond her relation to the lover's need. If we had not all experienced this, if we were mere logicians, we might boggle at the conception of desiring a human being as distinct from desiring any pleasure or comfort or service that that human being can give. And it is certainly hard to explain. Lovers themselves are trying to express part of it, not much, when they say they would like to eat one another. Milton has expressed more when he fancies angelic creatures with bodies made of light who can achieve total interpenetration instead of mere embraces. Charles Williams has said something of it in the words, "Love you, I am you." Without Eros, sexual desire, like every other desire, is a fact about ourselves. Within Eros, it is rather more about the beloved. It becomes almost a mode of perception, entirely a mode of expression. It feels objective, something outside us in the real world. That is why Eros, though the king of pleasures, always, at his height, has the air of regarding pleasure as a mere byproduct. To think about it would plunge us back into ourselves, into our own nervous system. It would kill Eros, as you can kill the finest mountain prospect by locating it all in your own retina and optic nerves. Anyway, whose pleasure? For one of the first things Eros does is to obliterate the distinction between giving and receiving. Hitherto, I have been merely trying to describe, not to evaluate, but certain moral questions now inevitably arise, and I must not conceal my own view of them. It is submitted rather than asserted, and of course open to correction by better men, better lovers, and better Christians. It has been widely held in the past, and is perhaps held by many unsophisticated people today, that the spiritual danger of Eros arises almost entirely from the carnal or physical, same thing, sorry, I'm just clarifying, element within it. That Eros is noblest or purest when Venus is reduced to the minimum. The older moral theologians certainly seem to have thought that the danger we chiefly had to guard against in marriage was that of a soul-destroying surrender to the senses. It will be noticed, however, that this is not the scriptural approach. St. Paul, dissuading his converts from marriage, says nothing about that side of the matter, except to discourage prolonged abstinence from Venus in 1 Corinthians 7, verse 5. What he fears is preoccupation, the need of constantly pleasing, that is, considering one's partner. The multiple distractions of domesticity. It is marriage itself, not the marriage bed, that will be likely to hinder us from waiting uninterruptedly on God. And surely St. Paul is right. If I may trust my own experience, it is within marriage, as without, the practical and prudential cares of this world, and even the smallest and most prosaic of those cares that are the great distraction. The gnat-like cloud of petty anxieties and decisions about the conduct of the next hour have interfered with my prayers more often than any passion or appetite whatsoever. The great, permanent temptation of marriage is not to sensuality, but quite bluntly to avarice. With all proper respect to the medieval guides, I cannot help remembering that they were all celibates, and probably did not know what Eros does to our sexuality. How, far from aggravating, he reduces the nagging and addictive character of mere appetite. And that not simply by satisfying it. Eros, without diminishing desire, makes abstinence easier. He tends, no doubt, to a preoccupation with the beloved, which can indeed be an obstacle to the spiritual life, but not chiefly a sensual preoccupation. The real spiritual danger in Eros as a whole lies, I believe, elsewhere. I will return to the point. For the moment, I want to speak of the danger, which at present, in my opinion, especially haunts the act of love. This is a subject on which I disagree, not with the human race, far from it, but with many of its gravest spokesmen. I believe we are all being encouraged to take Venus too seriously, at any rate, with a wrong kind of seriousness. All my life, a ludicrous and portentous solemnization of sex has been going on. One author tells us that Venus should recur through the married life in a solemn, sacramental rhythm. A young man to whom I had described as pornographic, a novel that he much admired, replied with genuine bewilderment, "Pornographic? But how can it be? It treats the whole thing so seriously, as if a long face were a kind of moral disinfectant." Our friend who harbours dark gods, the Pillar of Blood school, attempts seriously to restore something like the phallic religion. Our advertisements at their sexiest paint the whole business in terms of the rapt, the intense, the swoony devout, seldom a hint of gaiety. And the psychologists have so bedeviled us with the infinite importance of complete sexual adjustment and the all but impossibility of achieving it, that I could believe that some young couples now go to it with the complete works of Freud, Graf Ebbing, Havelock Ellis, and Dr. Stopes spread out on bed tables all around them. Cheery old Ovid, who never either ignored a molehill or made a mountain of it, would be more to the point. We have reached the stage at which nothing is more needed than a roar of old-fashioned laughter. Amen, Lewis. I love you, sir. Okay. But it will be replied, the thing is serious. Yes, quadruply so. First, theologically, by God's choice, the mystical union between God and man. Secondly, as what I will venture to call a sub-Christian or pagan or natural sacrament, our human participation in and exposition of the natural forces of life and fertility, the marriage of Sky Father and Earth Mother. Thirdly, on the moral level, in view of the obligations involved and the incalculable momentousness of being a parent and ancestor. Finally, it has sometimes, not always, a great emotional seriousness in the minds of the participants. But eating is also serious, theologically as the vehicle of the Blessed Sacrament, ethically in view of our duty to feed the hungry, socially because the table is from time immemorial the place for talk, medically, as all dyspeptics know. Yet we do not bring blue books to dinner, nor behave there as if we were in church. And it is gourmets, not saints, who come nearest to doing so. Animals are always serious about food. We must not be totally serious about Venus. Indeed, we can't be totally serious without doing violence to our humanity. It is not for nothing that every language and literature in the world is full of jokes about sex. Many of them may be dull or disgusting, and nearly all of them are old. But we must insist that they embody an attitude to Venus which in the long run endangers the Christian life far less than a reverential gravity. We must not attempt to find an absolute in the flesh. Banish play and laughter from the bed of love, and you may let in a false goddess. She will be even falser than the Aphrodite of the Greeks, for they, even whilst they worshipped her, knew that she was laughter-loving. The mass of the people are perfectly right in their conviction that Venus is a partly comic spirit. We are under no obligation at all to sing all our love duets in the throbbing, world without end, heartbreaking manner of Tristan and Isolde. Let us sing like Papageno and Papagena instead. Venus herself will have a terrible revenge if we take her occasional seriousness at its face value, and that in two ways. One is most comically, though with no comic intention, illustrated by Sir Thomas Browne, when he says that her service is the foolishest act a wise man commits in all his life, nor is there anything that will more deject his cooled imagination than he shall consider what an odd and unworthy piece of folly he has committed. But if he had gone about the act with less solemnity in the first place, he would not have suffered this dejection. If his imagination had not been misled, its cooling would have brought no such revulsion. But Venus has another and a worse revenge. She herself is a mocking and mischievous spirit, far more elf than deity, and makes game of us. When all external circumstances are fittest for her service, she will leave one or both the lovers totally indisposed for it. When every overt act is impossible and even glances cannot be exchanged, in trains, in shops, and at interminable parties, she will assail them both with all her force. An hour later, when time and place agree, she will have mysteriously withdrawn, perhaps from only one of them. What a pother this must raise! What resentments, what hurt, what self-pities, suspicions, wounded vanities, and all the current chatter about frustration in those who have deified her. But sensible lovers laugh. It is all part of the game, a game of catch as catch can, and the escapes and tumbles and head-on collisions are to be treated as a romp. For I can hardly help regarding it as one of God's jokes, that a passion so soaring, so apparently transcendent as Eros should thus be linked in incongruous symbiosis with a bodily appetite, which, like any other appetite, tactlessly reveals its connections with such mundane factors as weather, health, diet, circulation, and digestion. In Eros, at times, we seem to be flying. Venus gives us the sudden twitch that reminds us we are really captive balloons. It is a continual demonstration of the truth that we are composite creatures, rational animals, akin on one side to the angels, on the other to tomcats. It is a bad thing not to be able to take a joke. Worse, not to take a divine joke, made, I grant you, at our expense, amen, but also, who doubts it, for our endless benefits. And I'm just going to add in Romans 8:28. Man has held three views of his body. First, there is that of those ascetic pagans who called it the prison or the tomb of the soul, and of Christians like Fisher, to whom it was a sack of dung, food for worms, filthy, shameful, a source of nothing but temptation to bad men and humiliation to good ones. Then there are the neo-pagans, they seldom knew Greek, the nudists, and the sufferers from dark gods, to whom the body is glorious. But thirdly, we have the view which St. Francis expressed by calling his body brother ass. All three may be, I am not sure, defensible, but give me St. Francis for my money. Ass is exquisitely right, because no one in his senses can either revere or hate a donkey. It is a useful, sturdy, lazy, obstinate, patient, lovable, and infuriating beast, deserving now the stick and now the carrot, both pathetically and absurdly beautiful. So too the body. There's no living with it till we recognise that one of its functions in our lives is to play the part of buffoon. Until some theory has sophisticated them, every man, woman, and child in the world knows this. The fact that we have bodies is the oldest joke there is. Eros, like death, figure drawing, and the study of medicine, may at moments cause us to take it with total seriousness. The error consists in concluding that Eros should always do so and permanently abolish the joke. But this is not what happens. The very face of all the happy lovers we know make it clear. Lovers, unless their love is very short-lived, again and again feel an element not only of comedy, not only of play, but even of buffoonery in the body's expression of Eros. And the body would frustrate us if this were not so. It would be too clumsy an instrument to render love's music, unless its very clumsiness could be felt as adding to the total experience its own grotesque charm, a subplot or anti-mask miming with its own hearty rough and tumble what the soul enacts in statelier fashion. Thus, in old comedies, the lyric loves of the hero and heroine are at once parodied and corroborated by some much more earthy affair between a touchstone and an Audrey, or a valet and a chambermaid. The highest does not stand without the lowest. There is indeed at certain moments a high poetry in the flesh itself, but also by your love and irreducible element of obstinate and ludicrous unpoetry. If it does not make itself felt on one occasion, it will do so on another. Far better plant it foursquare within the drama of Eros as comic relief than pretend you have not noticed it. For indeed we require this relief. The poetry is there as well as the unpoetry, the gravity of Venus as well as her levity, the gravis ardor or burning weight of desire. Pleasure, pushed to its extreme, shatters us like pain. The longing for a union, which only the flesh can mediate, while the flesh, our mutually excluding bodies, renders it forever unattainable, can have the grandeur of a metaphysical pursuit. Amorousness, as well as grief, can bring tears to the eyes, but Venus does not always come thus, entire, fastened to her prey. And the fact that she sometimes does so is the very reason for preserving always a hint of playfulness in our attitude toward her. When natural things look most divine, the demoniac is just around the corner. This refusal to be quite immersed, this recollection of the levity, even when for a moment only the gravity is displayed, is especially relevant to a certain attitude which Venus, in her intensity, evokes from most, I believe not all, pairs of lovers. This act can invite the man to an extreme, this act can invite the man to an extreme, though short-lived masterfulness to the dominance of a conqueror or a captor, and the woman to a correspondingly extreme surrender and abjection. Hence the roughness, even fierceness of some erotic play. The lover's pinch which hurts and is desired. How should a sane couple think of this? Or a Christian couple permit it? I think it is harmless and wholesome on one condition. Excuse me. We must recognize that we have here to do what I called the pagan sacrament in sex. In friendship, as we noticed, each participant stands for precisely himself, the contingent individual he is. Sorry, excuse me. I have to find somewhere to put my drink now. I didn't think of that. Okay, but in the act of love, we are not merely ourselves. We are also representatives. It is here no impoverishment, but an enrichment, to be aware, that forces older and less personal than we work through us. In us, all the masculinity and femininity of the world, all that is assailant and responsive, are momentarily focused. The man does play the Sky Father and the woman the Earth Mother. He does play form and she matter. But we must give full value to the word play. Of course, neither plays a part in the sense of being a hypocrite. But each plays a part or role in something which is comparable to a mystery play or ritual at one extreme, and to a mask or even a charade at the other. A woman who accepted as literally her own this extreme self-surrender would be an idolatress, offering to a man what belongs only to God. And a man would have to be the coxcomb of all coxcombs, and indeed a blasphemer, if he arrogated to himself, as the mere person he is, the sort of sovereignty to which Venus for a moment exalts him. But what cannot lawfully be yielded or claimed can be lawfully enacted. Outside this ritual or drama, he and she are two immortal souls, two freeborn adults, two citizens. We should be much mistaken if we supposed that those unions where this mastery is most asserted and acknowledged in the act of Venus were those where the man is most likely to be dominant as a whole. The reverse is perhaps more probable. But within the rite or drama, they become a god and goddess between whom there is no equality, whose relations are asymmetrical. Some will think it strange I should find an element of ritual or masquerade in that action which is often regarded as the most real, the most unmasked and sheerly genuine we ever do. Are we not our true selves when naked? In a sense, no. The word naked was originally a past participle. The naked man was the man who had undergone a process of naking, that is, of stripping or peeling. You use the verb of fruits and nuts. Time out of mind, the naked man has seemed to our ancestors not the natural, but the abnormal man. Not the man who has abstained from dressing, but the man who has been, for some reason, undressed. And it is a simple fact. Anyone can observe it at a men's bathing place, that nudity emphasizes common humanity and soft pedals what is individual. In that way, we are more ourselves when clothed. But by nudity, the lovers cease to be solely John and Mary. The universal he and she are emphasized. You could almost say that they put on nakedness as a ceremonial robe or as the costume for a charade. For we must still beware, and never more than when we thus partake of the pagan sacrament in our love passages, of being serious in the wrong way. The Sky Father himself is only a pagan dream of one far greater than Zeus and far more masculine than the male. And a mortal man is not even the Sky Father and cannot really wear his crown. Only a copy of it. done in tinselled paper. I do not call it this in contempt. I like ritual. I like private theatricals. I even like charades. Paper crowns have their legitimate, in the proper context, their serious uses. They are not in the last resort much flimsier, if imagination mend them, than all earthly dignities. But I dare not mention this pagan sacrament without turning aside to guard against any danger of confusing it with an incomparably higher mystery. As nature crowns man in that brief action, so the Christian law has crowned him in the permanent relationship of marriage, bestowing, or should I say inflicting, a certain headship on him. This is very different, and a very different coronation. And as we could easily take the natural mystery too seriously, so we might take the Christian mystery not seriously enough. Christian writers, notably Milton, have sometimes spoken of the husband's headship with a complacency to make the blood run cold. We must go back to our Bibles. The husband is the head of the wife, just insofar as he is to her what Christ is to the church. He is to love her as Christ loved the church, and read on, as Christ gave his life for her. This headship, then, is most fully embodied, not in the husband we should all wish to be, but in him whose marriage is most like a crucifixion. I love this man. Whose wife receives most and gives least, is most unworthy of him, is in her own mere nature the least lovable. For the church has no beauty but what the bridegroom gives her. He does not find but makes her lovely. The chrism of this terrible coronation is to be seen not in the joys of any man's marriage, but in its sorrows, in the sickness. I'm so sorry to anyone who's married. I'm sorry. The chrism of this terrible coronation is to be seen not in the joys of any man's marriage, but in its sorrows, in the sickness and sufferings of a good wife, or the faults of a bad one, in his unwearying, never paraded care, or his inexhaustible forgiveness, not acquiescence. As Christ sees in the flawed, proud, fanatical, or lukewarm church on earth that bride who will one day be without spot or wrinkle, and labours to produce the latter, so the husband whose headship is Christ-like, and he is allowed no other sort, never despairs. He is a king Cophetua, who after 20 years still hopes that the beggar girl will one day learn to speak the truth and wash behind her ears. To say this is not to say that there is any virtue or wisdom in making a marriage that involves such misery. There is no wisdom or virtue in seeking unnecessary martyrdom or deliberately courting persecution. Yet it is, nonetheless, the persecuted or martyred Christian in whom the pattern of the master is most unambiguously realized. So, in these terrible marriages, once they have come about, the headship of the husband, if only he can sustain it, is most Christ-like. The sternest feminist need not grudge my sex the crown offered to it, either in the pagan or Christian mystery. For the one is of paper, and the other is of thorns. The real danger is not that husbands may grasp the latter too eagerly, but that they will allow or compel their wives to usurp it. From Venus, the carnal ingredient within Eros, I now turn to Eros as a whole. Here we shall see the same pattern repeated. As Venus within Eros does not really aim at pleasure, so Eros does not aim at happiness. We may think he does, but when he is brought to the test, it proves otherwise. Everyone knows that it is useless to try to separate lovers by proving to them that their marriage will be an unhappy one. This is not only because they will disbelieve you, they usually will, no doubt, but even if they believed you, they would not be dissuaded. For it is the very mark of Eros that when he is in us, we had rather share unhappiness with the beloved than be happy on any other terms. Even if the two lovers are mature and experienced, people who know that broken hearts heal in the end and can clearly foresee that if they once steeled themselves to go through the present agony of parting, they would almost certainly be happier 10 years hence than their union is at all likely to make them. Even then, they would not part. To Eros, all these calculations are irrelevant, just as the coolly brutal judgment of Lucretius is irrelevant to Venus. Even when it becomes clear beyond all evasion that union with the beloved cannot possibly lead to happiness, when it cannot even profess to offer any other life than that of tending an incurable invalid, of hopeless poverty, of exile, or of disgrace, Eros never hesitates to say, better this than parting. Better to be miserable with her than happy without her. Let our hearts break, provided only they break together. If the voice within us does not say this, it is not the voice of Eros. This is the grandeur and the terror of love. But notice, as before, side by side with this grandeur, the playfulness. Eros, as well as Venus, is the subject of countless jokes, and even when the circumstances of the two lovers are so tragic that no bystander could keep back his tears, they themselves, in want, in hospital wards, on visitors' days in prisons, will sometimes be surprised by a merriment which strikes the onlooker, but not them, as unbearably pathetic. Nothing is more false than the idea that mockery is necessarily hostile. Amen. Until they have a baby to laugh at, lovers are always laughing at each other. It is in the grandeur of Eros that the seeds of danger are concealed. He has spoken like a god. His total commitment, his reckless disregard of happiness, his transcendence of self-regard sound like a message from the eternal world. And yet it cannot, just as it stands, be the voice of God himself. For Eros, speaking with that very grandeur and displaying that very transcendence of self, may urge to evil as well as to good. Nothing is more shallow than the belief that a love which leads to sin is always qualitatively lower, i.e. more animal or more trivial, than one which leads to faithful and fruitful Christian union. Did you catch that? The love which leads to cruel and perjured unions, even to suicide pacts and to murder, is not likely to be wandering lust or idle sentiment. It may well be Eros in all his splendour, heartbreakingly sincere, ready for every sacrifice except renunciation. There have been schools of thought which accepted the voice of Eros as something actually transcendent and tried to justify the absoluteness of his commands. Plato will have it that falling in love is the mutual recognition on earth of souls which have been singled out for one another, and it's so lovely, in a previous and celestial existence. To meet the beloved is to realize we loved before we were born. As a myth to express what lovers feel, this is admirable. But if one accepted it literally, one would be faced by an embarrassing consequence. We should have to conclude that in that heavenly and forgotten life, affairs were no better managed than here. For Eros may unite the most unsuitable yoke fellows, many unhappy and predictably unhappy marriages were love matches. A theory more likely to be accepted in our own day is what we call Shavian. Shaw himself might have said metabiological, the voice of the élan vital or life force, the evolutionary appetite. In overwhelming a particular couple, it is seeking parents or ancestors for the Superman. It is indifferent both to their personal happiness and to the rules of morality, because it aims at something which Shaw thinks very much more important, the future perfection of our species. But if all this were true, it hardly makes clear whether, and if so, why we should obey it. All pictures yet offered us of the Superman are so unattractive that one might well vow celibacy at once to avoid the risk of begetting him. And secondly, this theory surely leads to the conclusion that the life force does not very well understand its, or her, or his own business. So far as we can see, the existence or intensity of Eros between two people is no warrant that their offspring will be especially satisfactory, or even that they will have offspring at all. Two good strains in the stock breeding sense, not two good lovers, is the recipe for fine children. And what on earth was the life force doing through all those countless generations when the begetting of children depended very little on mutual eros and very much on arranged marriages, slavery, and rape? Has it only just thought of this bright idea for improving the species? Neither the Platonic nor the Shavian type of erotic transcendentalism can help a Christian. We are not worshippers of the life force, and we know nothing of previous existences. We must not give unconditional obedience to the voice of Eros when he speaks most like a god. Neither must we ignore or attempt to deny the god-like quality. This love is really and truly like love himself. In it there is a real nearness to God by resemblance, but not, therefore, and necessarily, a nearness of approach. Eros, honoured so far as love of God and charity to our fellows will allow, may become for us a means of approach. His total commitment is a paradigm or example built into our natures of the love we ought to exercise towards God and man. As nature, for the nature lover, gives a content to the word glory, so this gives content to the word charity. It is as if Christ said to us through Eros, thus, just like this, with this prodigality, not counting the cost, you are to love me and the least of my brethren. Our conditional honour to Eros will, of course, vary with our circumstance. Of some, a total renunciation, but not a contempt, is required. Others, with Eros as their fuel and also as their model, can embark upon married life, within which Eros of himself will never be enough, will indeed survive only in so far as he is continually chastened and corroborated by the higher principles. But Eros, honoured without reservation and obeyed unconditionally, becomes a demon. And this is just how he claims to be honoured and obeyed. Divinely indifferent to our selfishness, he is also demonically rebellious to every claim of God or man that would oppose him. Hence, as the poet says, people in love cannot be moved by kindness, and opposition makes them feel like martyrs. Martyrs is exactly right. Years ago, when I wrote about medieval love poetry and described its strange, half make-believe religion of love, I was blind enough to treat this as an almost purely literary phenomenon. I know better now. Eros, by his nature, invites it. Of all loves, he is at his height most godlike, therefore most prone to demand our worship. Of himself, he always tends to turn being in love into a sort of religion. Theologians have often feared in this love a danger of idolatry. I think they meant by this that the lovers might idolize one another. That does not seem to me the real danger, certainly not in marriage. The deliciously plain prose and business-like intimacy of married life render it absurd. So does the affection, in which Eros is almost invariably clothed. Even in courtship, I question whether anyone who has felt the thirst for the uncreated, or even dreamt of feeling it, ever supposed that the beloved could satisfy it. As a fellow pilgrim, pierced with the very same desire that is, as a friend, the beloved may be gloriously and helpfully relevant, but as an object for it, well, I would not be rude, ridiculous. The real danger seems to me not that the lovers will idolize each other, that they will idolize Eros himself. I do not, of course, mean that they will build altars or say prayers to him. The idolatry I speak of can be seen in the popular misinterpretation of our Lord's words. Her sins, which are many, are forgiven her, for she loved much. From the context, and especially from the preceding parable of the debtors, it is clear to me that this must mean the greatness of her love for me is evidence of the greatness of the sins I have forgiven her. The for here is like the for in he can't have gone out, for his hat is still hanging in the hall. The presence of the hat is not the cause of his being in the house, but a probable proof that he is. But thousands of people take it quite differently. They first assume that her sins were sins against chastity. Though, for all we know, they may have been usury, dishonest shopkeeping, or cruelty to children. And then they take our Lord to be saying, I forgive her unchastity because she was so in love. The implication is that a great Eros extenuates, almost sanctions, almost sanctifies any actions it leads to. Excuse me. When lovers say of some act that we might blame love made us do it, notice the tone. A man saying, I did it because I was frightened, or I did it because I was angry, speaks quite differently. He is putting forward an excuse for what he feels to require excusing. But the lovers are seldom doing quite that. Notice how tremulously, almost how devoutly, they say the word love. Not so much pleading an extenuating circumstance as appealing to an authority. The confession can be almost a boast. There can be a shade of defiance in it. They feel like martyrs. In extreme cases, what their words really express is a demure yet unshakable allegiance to the God of love. These reasons in love's law have passed for good, says Milton's Delilah. That is the point. In love's law. In love, we have our own law, a religion of our own good. Where a true Eros is present, resistance to his commands feels like apostasy. And what are really, by the Christian standard, temptations, speak with the voice of duties, quasi-religious duties, acts of pious zeal to love. He builds his own religion around the lovers. Benjamin Constant has noticed how he creates for them in a few weeks or months a joint past which seems to them immemorial. They recur to it continually with wonder and reverence, as the psalmists recur to the history of Israel. It is in fact the Old Testament of love's religion, the record of love's judgments and mercies towards his chosen pair, up to the moment when they first knew they were lovers. After that, its New Testament begins. They are now under a new law, under what corresponds, in this religion, to grace. They are new creatures. The spirit of Eros supersedes all laws, and they must not grieve it. It seems to sanction all sorts of actions they would not otherwise have dared. I do not mean solely or chiefly acts that violate chastity. They are just as likely to be acts of injustice or uncharity against the outside world. They will seem like proofs of piety and zeal towards Eros. The pair can say to one another, in an almost sacrificial spirit, It is for love's sake that I have neglected my parents, left my children, cheated on my partner, failed my friend at his greatest need. These reasons in love's law have passed for good. The votaries may even come to feel a particular merit in such sacrifice. What costlier offering can be laid on love's altar than one's own conscience? And all the time the grim joke is that this Eros, whose voice seems to speak from the eternal realm, is not necessarily himself even permanent. He is notoriously the most mortal of our loves. The world rings with complaints of his fickleness. What is baffling is the combination of this fickleness with his protestations of permanency. To be in love is both to intend and to promise to be lifelong. Love makes vows unasked. Can't be deterred from making them. In fact, I will be forever true to you, are almost the first words he utters. Not hypocritically, but sincerely. No experience will cure him of the delusion. We have all heard of people who are in love again every few years, each time sincerely convinced that this time it's the real thing, that their wanderings are over, that they have found their true love, and will themselves be true unto death. And yet, Eros is in a sense right to make the promise. The event of falling in love is of such a nature that we are right to reject as intolerable the idea that it should be transitory. In one high bound, it has overleaped the massive wall of our selfhood. It has made appetite itself altruistic, tossed personal happiness aside as a triviality, and planted the interests of another, the beloved, in the centre of our being. Spontaneously and without effort, we have fulfilled the law towards one person. By loving our neighbour as ourselves, it is an image, a foretaste of what we must become to all if love himself rules in us without a rival. It is even, well used, a preparation for that. Simply to relapse from it, merely to fall out of love again, is, if I may coin the ugly word, a sort of disredemption. Eros is driven to promise what Eros of himself cannot perform. Can we be in this selfless liberation for a lifetime? Hardly for a week. Between the best possible lovers, this high condition is intermittent. The old self soon turns out to be not so dead as he pretended, as after a religious conversion. In either, he may be momentarily knocked flat. He will soon be up again. If not on his feet, at least on an elbow. If not roaring, at least back to his surly grumbling or his mendicant whine. And Venus will often slip back into mere sexuality. But these lapses will not destroy marriage or union between two decent and sensible people. The couple whose marriage will certainly be endangered by them and possibly ruined are those who idolized Eros. They thought he had the power and truthfulness of a god. They expected that mere feeling would do for them, and permanently, all that was necessary. When this expectation is disappointed, they throw the blame on Eros, or more usually, on each other. In reality, however, Eros, having made his gigantic promise and shown you in glimpses what its performance would be like, has done his stuff. He, like a godparent, makes the vows. It's he who must keep them. It is we who must labour to bring our daily life into even closer accordance with what the glimpses have revealed. We must do the works of Eros when Eros is not present. This all good lovers know, though those who are not reflective or articulate will be able to express it only in a few conventional phrases about taking the rough with the smooth. I do apologise, I've got to plug my phone in. Gosh. That's irritating. And what's more irritating is I've just spilled my drink everywhere. But the show must go on. Oh, but I am now. Oh my gosh. Okay. Let me just move that along so I'm not sitting in what I would have been sitting in. Okay, apologise. Where was I? Taking the rough along with the smooth, as I just did, by the way. Not expecting too much, having a little common sense, and the like. And all good Christian lovers know that this programme, modest as it sounds, will not be carried out except by humility, charity, and divine grace. That it is indeed the whole Christian life seen from one particular angle. Thus, Eros, like the other loves, but more strikingly because of his strength, his sweetness, his terror and high port, reveals his true status. He cannot of himself be what, nevertheless, he must be if he is to remain Eros. He needs help, therefore needs to be ruled. The god dies or becomes a demon unless he obeys God. It would be well if in such case he always died, but he may live on, mercilessly chaining together two mutual tormentors, each raw all over with the poison of hate in love, each ravenous to receive and implacably refusing to give, jealous, suspicious, resentful, struggling for the upper hand, determined to be free and to allow no freedom, living on scenes. Read Anna Karenina and do not fancy that such things happen only in Russia. The lovers' old hyperbole of eating each other can come horribly near to the truth. Okay then. So, I love Lewis. I just want to throw it out there. He's one of my favourite authors. So, does anybody have any brief questions in order that I can mop up this stuff? But yeah, actually, I don't mind that. Does anybody have any questions before I close this? Because I think that's quite a lot to digest. I don't know if I have any admins here at the moment. Okay, so I know there's also a delay. So I'm going to give you all like 10, 20 seconds in order to type anything. Thank you very much, Jeff. It's very kind of you to say so. I know that the accolade is for Lewis, but still, I'll take some of the reflected praise. So Jonathan is asking, did Plato believe in pre-existence? Plato, the thing with, I would have to look into it, but philosophically speaking, like all things are considered, if that makes sense, and then argued from a position that they hold some truth. I would have to look into it though. Socrates and Aristotle I'm more familiar with. Although Plato questioned the existence of reality, like as we know it. I think the Platonic, I think there's something about a cave and the reflected light and stuff like that. So yeah. Okay, so I don't have any admins, but I will just do it myself, I guess. That is odd. I started with a few, but never mind. Okay, so any more questions? And anyone with manners? Obviously, there's someone who's, I don't want to say a bit of a dick, but I think I just did. So yeah, anybody else? Okay then. Yes, that's the one I was thinking of, Jonathan, the cave. He does exactly that, Jeff. All you've got to do is rewind. He's covered it from every angle. He does make me chuckle as well. And I love the word beloved. I think it's so charming. Both he and Spurgeon use it, even though Spurgeon was his predecessor. It's I just like reading it out. It just sounds so charming and nice. Okay then. So I shall, like that was pretty long now, actually. Yeah, so we're getting up to that time. So I'm going to say, God bless you. Thank you for listening. Do look at Lewis. I will continue on to the other two loves. Potentially I'll leave it a day though, because it's, when doing it live, it is pretty like full on. I can't really concentrate on the chit chat, which is what I like to do also. So I'll just, yeah, I'm not going to promise prems or links or descriptions, but there will be one. Okay, so I'm going to answer the last-ish question. Amen, Asif. Amen, brother. Jonathan is asking me, was this Lewis's response to anti-chastity? No. This is part of the Four Loves, which is a book of Lewis's, in which he, so affection, I've already done the video on that. That's one of the loves. This is Eros, and the other two, it's secret. It won't be for long. I'll do those. So no, he was just talking about the loves in general. Yeah. Rodney, sorry, lovey. It's potentially the time zone massive difference, but I'll be on later if it's. Oh no, it's evening. All right, I give up trying to work out when or what day or time it is in Australia. Okay, so any more, and then I'm off ski because shucks, I'm never going to do another live without having my phone plugged in at the time. It's just shockingly like unprepared. I just had the what's the word? I just had an overwhelming urge to do more Lewis because I love that man so deeply. I know, Jonathan. Potentially, so Jonathan's saying it is pretty difficult to follow because it's kind of deep, high open secrets, and I agree. When I'm reading Lewis, I often find that because he covers stuff so fully, my mind starts wandering down one avenue, and then I get maybe to the bottom of the page and I'm like, I don't actually know what I've read. I hear the words being read out in my mind, but I'm like, I don't know what, like I haven't thought about that. And I go back. So what I may do, I can do it for this one. I'm always promising stuff. I get on my own nerves. Yeah, I can link to a PDF of the transcript that I'm reading from, and you're welcome to read along at the same time, as it were. Yes, Jeff, there is most certainly the underlying highbrow humour. It's shocking for me for Lewis because he loved like dearly his wife, but the jokes he was cracking about marriage just funny. It just make me giggle and blush as well, some of them. Okay, yes, you will see me in Speaker's Corner. Yes, you most certainly will. Yep, that's always a pleasure for me to do, and I will live stream, and I will have a backup charger and a charger and an everything. So I look forward to that. And I am oh, Jeff, bless. Yeah. Okay, so actually I'm just going to take a moment to reiterate. I can't think of the words that I actually typed out. But this is, kindness is very much related to love. Mothers, sorry, I was just reading a comment including somebody's mother. Mothers are like, I guess, our first experience of kindness and of love if something hasn't gone terribly wrong. And so what I would say is this, what I was pondering, I think it was last night I posted it. I would like to believe that I made the world a better place by being in it just for even one person. That for me would like mean a lot, kind of thing. And in order to do that, like what I was trying to like put into words, not very well, I guess, is that none of us know how long we have. Like I've had so many bereavements this year, it's getting like some sort of grotesque dark comedy. Like it's really like, really another one. And because of that, I've considered that coming back to love, the way that Lewis speaks about it, like I don't really care for the niceties and maybe the rules that, I just want to love who I want to love, and I have to love those I don't want to love anyway. But in terms of intimacy and friendships and, you know, love stuff, life is too short, far too short, to be waiting for somebody else to be kind before we are kind to them, or waiting for somebody to change before we are kind to them, or waiting for them to love us before we love them. You don't know how important or how day changing or life changing just the kindness of smiling at someone might be, of you know, like listening. Like I often, the love language that I most closely relate to, I guess there are two of them, of the five love, that's another author, but is like my time is very, very precious to me. So if I spend time with somebody, like I, you know, that's one of the ways I show love. And the other is the giving of gifts. That's only small things, but or the gift of my time, or the gift of something. So you don't know, like the time when maybe you spent an hour listening to someone's fears and anxieties, and even though they don't really want reassurance because they're just kind of having a little anxiety fest, like just being there and just smiling and just having them know that someone cares can be life changing. It really can, really can. I've had a lot of experience of you know, yeah, like psychology and stuffs. So that can change somebody's life. Just I don't know, paying for somebody's coffee if their bank card doesn't work and they're all embarrassed at the front of the queue. Not only does it get me my coffee quicker, let's not pretend I'm like all selfless out here, but also I did it not so long ago. I paid for some two people's bus fare because yeah, both of, I think one of them, their phone had died and the means of payment was on their phone, and the driver was being a bit of a bus driver, a bit like that. And they were both so like, and the girl, I also gave her the battery charger thingy, and she was so happy. And then she ended up paying for somebody else's fare when they got like, and it's just lovely to be loving, and it's a blessing to be a blessing, and it's nice to be nice. And like, why can't we have a positive impact? This world is so wicked and dark, as it were. You know, there's just Christians being macheted and set on fire and dumped in open graves while they're still alive, having watched their children raped or their parents dismembered, and had their whole village set on fire, and had everybody, you know, outside of their country ignore it. That why not send somebody a message in the middle of the night that they'll wake up to, and like have their heart feel a bit warmed by the fact that you were thinking of them? Why not just send a letter to one of the persecuted church? Why not send an email to the Middle East, like for one of our brothers and sisters? Why not tell someone you love them? Why not? Give me an answer, or just do it. Why not? What's the downside? What's the, you know, not everything has to have a payoff for us in the immediate future to be a valid course, or like a, you know, like a thing to do. God shows his most perfect mercy through us often, his grace through us, his love through us, his redemption through us, his Jonathan, you're no worries, kid. But yeah, he shows all of his everything about him. But he can use us as vehicles for those things. So pull your socks up, pull your finger out. So I've gone all London. Do something about it. Just be a blessing to one person today. And if we all do that, like there's lots of us. There's lots of us. We can make it just a little bit brighter. The light of Christ to shine a little bit more clearly into this nutty globalist, weird, satanic stuff that's going on. So yeah, all right, she's down off her rant, people. There were no one telling her to shush, so she didn't. Okay then. Thank you for everybody in the chat. Thanks for everybody maybe started this bit and then just like went into a coma and are no longer with us, unfortunately, temporarily. But yeah, I realise it's differing times and it's middle of the night for some people and pre-coffee morning for others. Rodney, depending on how big and scary looking you are, it can really surprise someone to say hello in the street. In London sometimes, like they just look at you like, isn't it medication time yet? I think maybe just, I think the smile work, it disarms people most. Do you know what I mean? Hello can be a bit like, well, it depends whether you live in New York, London, or like out in the countryside. But yeah, it's still like good going. That's it, Mick. You've got it. If you bring happiness to others, it's also not selfish, but you will feel better. And if you make people unhappy, you know yourself, hopefully, if you've got a conscience, that you feel bad about it. And that is why it's lovely to love and to be loved, even though it makes you vulnerable and it's a bit like bit, I don't know, bit scary. It's still all right. It's still all right. And Romans 8:28 means that whatever you're going through, all things work. God works in all things to the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So stick that in your pipes, you little stressy Bessies. You all know who you are, who just love to just dramatize and to what if, oh no, what if this happens, what if that happens, oh no, what if I'm not good enough, what if, blah, 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 blah. But what if you cast all your anxieties on him, for example? What if there's enough evil in this day that you don't have to project outwards into the future? What if the future may not even be there? What if Jesus just comes back and you're in the middle of just being Aggie instead of loving people? What if? Yeah, stressy Bessies and negative Nancy's. They make up a little committee somewhere. Anyway, she's waffled enough now. It's getting ridiculous. So I press the first button because it's what I do, people. And I'm going to remind you, please, the address that I gave. Hi, John. The address that I gave in the Speaker's Corner video that I entitled, I think, Please Watch and Get a Pen, is not the only one. And I was incorrect when I did a short live stream with the little piece of paper. Those dates aren't finished yet. There's another 11 days for those, the deadline for postal. So it looks like I'll be doing it again. So the next live stream I do, I will endeavour to not spill my drink all over myself and be sitting here with a wet leg. And also to jolly well fix up and give you the information so that you can join me in not stressing about the persecuted church, because God has got it all in hand. But we can be a blessing to those people. We can. They already received the blessing, but who knows? The Bible, when it speaks about blessed are those who are persecuted for my name's sake, maybe we are the ones to deliver those, or the postman to deliver those blessings. Because I can't tell you how upsetting I find it. I mean, not all of the butchery and the all of that's a given, but how like it makes me feel like I've been punched in the throat when I think that they think we've forgotten them, that we don't know, and that we're just all like, getting on with our easy lives. I can't stand it. Can't stand it. And also the thought of like children being afraid, and I don't like it. So I'd like to alleviate that stress for them in no matter how small a way. Open secrets, amen. We have to support each other. When one of us suffers, we all suffer. And when one rejoices, we all rejoice. And that's the Holy Spirit saying that. So suck it up if you don't believe it, because it's true. Jonathan, I'll look into it, lovey. I don't know. All right, then. God bless you all and lots of love to you all. And I do pray regularly, even though I don't know all your names or your, what you need. The Holy Spirit knows what you need, so I'm just like adding my little 2 pence of prayers for you all, and also for the persecuted church. Please don't forget them, even in your prayers. Okay, so lots of love. Speak to you soon. Do a live stream / prem whenever, because whenever I rewatch the videos afterwards, I'm like, why is she saying that? Why is she promising stuff? But when I'm watching this back, shh, you know you love it. All right then. So I'll see you soon. God bless. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Do something kind, and let me know how it goes. All right. God bless you. Bye bye.